think the League of Women Voters is one of the few places where you would get a chance to hear about the county budget. And we are very happy and privileged to have Lou Bauman, who's the County Administrative Officer, and Jane Parker, Supervisor, who will both address the budget. And Lou will give us the background and some history and some of the issues, and Jane is here to respond to some of the policy questions. Lou has been the County Administrative Officer for some time. I think it's since 2005. I recall that because I was on the grand jury when you were first appointed. Previous to that, he was the Director of Monterey County Public Works Department. He has a master's and a PhD in civil engineering from UCLA, and prior professional experience includes environmental consultant and public works leadership for San Jose and Foster City. He has served and continues to serve on many nonprofit boards. So with that, we will ask Lou to give his presentation, and then I'll introduce Jane.
Let me begin by thanking all of you for the kind invitation today, and it's a pleasure to speak with you. And let me also thank you for your civic involvement. Claudio Valenzuela sends his regards and his gratitude for the work that you do in and around elections and democracy. So we appreciate the work you do and keep up the great energy. What I want to do this afternoon, and I am grateful for your interest in the county budget. It is a complicated and somewhat arcane issue, but it is so important to the lives that we live and the quality of life that we have in Monterey County. So what I want to do is give a little background about the industry that supports our budget, and then get into the total county budget, a little more detail about the general fund and some of those issues. Time permitting, we can talk a little bit about some of the major capital projects that the county is embarking on, and our supervisor is here today to join me in some of the more difficult policy issues associated with the budget and county government. With that, and Supervisor Parker has been kind enough to assist in the PowerPoint. Of course, we are all blessed to live in this beautiful county. As we know, it's 3,000 square miles, and it's really separated into two regions, the Salinas Valley as well as the Monterey Peninsula. We are what is called a general law government. We comply with the general provisions of the state codes. We don't have any special charter powers, and we have 5 supervisors that are elected by district. We have a population of about 425, relatively steady and constant growth. Of course, our growth is limited by resources, transportation, and water, as we're all familiar with. But we do have a large segment of our population that is eligible to participate in the workforce, and that is a good omen for our economy as we move into the years ahead. In terms of industry and employment, we all know the key industries are agriculture, tourism, education, and very importantly, the presence of the military in our community. If you look here on the graphic, you can see the top employers in Monterey County. You can see how diverse they are in terms of their industries. And these really are the pillars of our economy, not only for the county, but for the cities as well. Beginning with agriculture. In our last crop report, the farm gate value, or the actual production value, exceeded $4 billion. The Ag Commissioner has done a number of studies that indicate that generates a secondary economy of over $8 billion. And we ship 750 million pounds of vegetables to 54 countries across the globe, from Canada to Kuwait. So wherever you go, stop in the market, you pick up a value-added package, and you'll see that it's produced in Salinas, California. So we're very proud of that industry. What is unique is the industry is evolving rapidly. The industry is engaging in significant research and innovation. We're beginning to see agriculture really move into the 21st century. They're beginning to use drones for a variety of crop monitoring and maintenance. They have new sensors that they can deploy through the soil that will maximize irrigation technologies, monitor nutrient levels, new seed technologies, and a variety of new mechanized, essentially robots that can assist with weeding and cultivation. It'll be interesting in the decade ahead to see the transformation of the agricultural industry and its growth as they increasingly get more and more crops from a given output. In addition to that, as we all know, tourism is critically important to this community in keeping our beautiful attractions. Not many folks realize it, but we're also a major oil producer. The South County San Ardo field is about the 13th largest field in California, and California is amongst the top oil producers in the nation. So that too is an important part of our economy. Now, when you look at that economy, what it drives revenues for county services as well as our local city services. And what this graphic here represents is what county revenues, this is statewide data, it's a little bit older, but it's representative of the revenues that come into counties and how they're spent. You can see that counties are really funded almost 50% by state and federal revenues, and then the remainder is local taxes and fees and charges that are generated locally. And those services then translate primarily into health, welfare, and public safety. And that goes all the way across the 58 counties in California. Now, if you compare that to cities, again, this is a graphic indicating across the state, city revenues, they're broken up between sales tax and hotel tax and what they call enterprise charges. And the enterprise charges come from business-like operations, primarily sewer and water and the like, the sports center, activities that generate their own revenues to support the governmental service. And that's why in cities are always prioritizing development, auto dealerships, tax revenue generating businesses that can come in to help support police and fire and the community services that they provide. Counties live primarily on property tax. So if you look, and we'll get into a little bit more detail, but counties live primarily about 70% on property tax, hotel tax, sales tax, and franchise fees. As you can imagine, in the last downturn, which was the first downturn in our local history of where property taxes really took a hit in our county, it was really a trying financial period for us. But fortunately, as you can see, it's not good for young people looking to buy a home, but for those of us that do own homes, the property taxes and their associated net assessed value are again increasing. Steve Vagnini, our assessor, had compiled property tax values back some 40 years. In this county, there were years when we had double-digit increases in our assessed value for property tax. So hence our $1 million homes. And again, that is a key driver for the services that we provide in county government. The projections from the state and the real estate organizations is that it will remain positive. It's always a guess, if you will, in light of all the global turmoil and the downturn in China and the immigration going on in Europe. But nevertheless, our economy remains relatively strong. And you can see the outlook for new residential units in Monterey County. In terms of the property tax base, we are very fortunate, as I mentioned, Pebble Beach Company is an example, the San Ardo oil fields, some of our large electric facilities. Those provide a long-term stable tax base coupled with our residential assets and properties that provide stability to the county. Now, what do we do with this money? Now, keep in mind that the assessed rate is about 1%. And what you can see here is where that money goes. On your property tax bill, that for every dollar that you pay, about 60 cents goes to schools and supports our school system. About 15% goes to the county. And then the remaining goes to special districts. The cities get a portion. Our libraries get a small portion. And from this, you can see that the counties are not a major portion of the property tax allocation, about 15%. We have a multitude of tax rate areas. It does vary, but that's about a round number. In terms of sales tax, again, we're very fortunate to have a diverse retail sector. And as you can see in the pie chart, we have a variety of sources to obtain sales taxes throughout the county. Similarly, with transient occupancy tax, because of the beauty of our destination, recent events like Big Blue Live, all the events that we have at Pebble Beach, at Laguna Seca Raceway, continue to be a consistent draw, along with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, to a variety of visitors. And one of the assets that we have here in Monterey County is that we not only can attract local visitors from the Silicon Valley and the San Joaquin Valley, but we're also increasingly attracting visitors from across the world, and particularly our interest in the Far East as well. Now, with these revenues, our task at the county is to allocate those revenues to maximize the services that we can provide to our community. I think of it personally as kind of an upside down business, because in a sense, in a business, you leverage, you borrow, you deploy, and you generate revenues. The county has the reverse situation where the tax money comes rolling in, and then we have to deploy and maximize revenues within those fiscal constraints. So that if we over deploy, then we run into the challenge of overextending our budget resources. So it's really a task of allocating and managing those resources. If you look at the overall budget, which includes what we call the non-general fund units, and those non-general fund units would be enterprises such as Natividad Medical Center, our Water Resources Agency, or our Road Fund. But overall, if all those funds are combined, our budget's about $1.2 billion. And we've just seen it increase in the past decade. And again, that's a result of our healthy, primarily property tax values. As you can see, taxes are a portion of our total revenue. Licenses and permits, so if you come in for a building permit, a marriage license, any sort of discretionary dog license, there's an associated fee, and that's an important part of the revenue. Fines, forfeitures, and penalties in coordination with the court. And then a variety of other revenues provide the total funding for the county operations. Our job is to ensure that we deploy adequate resources to provide our services, and we do this under the guidance of the Board of Supervisors. The board has been phenomenal fiscal managers over the past decade. They also have a board budget committee that works with our staff and reviews in detail not only the projected budgets, but we monitor the budgets of the department as we move through the year. What we do is we begin this process around now in the fall. Come September, October, we receive input of the needs of the departments. We assess our revenues and projections of property tax, sales tax, and other intergovernmental revenues. And then we begin the process of proposed allocations to the departments. And what you can see is the various groups of which the county expends. And you can see, although those many lines, public safety is the primary consumer of our county resources, which includes the sheriff operations, jail operations, district attorney, public defender, and our probation departments is a major cost for our county. And then you can see the administrative costs amongst our various departments. So if you break it out into the dollar, now remember this dollar represents 15% of the dollar you paid on your property tax. So if you take that dollar that we receive, about 40% on health and sanitation, about 30% on public safety, and a smaller percentage for government. The education portion, we do not fund education as other counties do, particularly back east. The education represents our cooperative extension, which is a partnership with UC Davis, like many other counties, which provides agricultural education and research. Now the general fund, as I mentioned, is a subset of our larger total county, and that's about $600 million overall for this fiscal year. It continues to grow. And the general fund mirrors the distribution, as we talked, for the overall county. It's our largest fund, and it supports all non-enterprise activities in the county. And again, you can see the breakout here of the various revenues that come into the general fund. And again, property tax is a major portion of that. One thing that's important to remember is because counties are stable, they're large, and in the absence of a state fiscal crisis or dramatic change in assessed value of our property, the budget is pretty much spoken for from year to year. And we'll talk a little bit about discretionary revenue, but the Board of Supervisors has a very limited resource in which to allocate to new or changing activities within the county operation. So if you look at non-program revenue, now that is a complicated term, but that means discretionary revenue. Program revenue is designated to an activity or program, and it must be spent on that activity, and it's generally supplemented by fees or charges. And again, you can see that it's primarily taxes and other license permit fees and so forth. So this is a small percent of the budget. So the budget, another way to think about it, is the county is a very leveraged organization. For about 16 cents, we provide $1 of services. And we get those money from federal and state resources and then local fees and charges. So again, it makes for a very tight budgeting process from year to year. Where do we spend those monies? Again, here's an allocation of just in a graphic form to showing that public safety and health and welfare are the primary expenditures of general law counties. And again, just a tabular format to show the distribution. If you are a budget wonk and you are interested in more detail, the supervisors supported our staff to go ahead and use a tool called OpenGov. It's very sophisticated. You can find it on our website. You can go into any particular department. We have about 4 or 5 years of data in there, and you can analyze the budget of that department, the use of funds. If you just go to the Monterey County website and go into the search window and type OpenGov, it'll search and bring that up as the first item. The county is also the treasury for not only county funds, but for all the schools and a majority of our special districts, such as fire districts. And our treasurer, Ms. Mary Zeeb, oversees that fund, and you can just see how those funds are distributed. Many of them are in federal securities or overnight securities. We're very conservative, and we want to ensure that we're good stewards of those funds for not only our county services, but for our local schools. Many of the facilities in this county were rebuilt in the 50s and 60s. Many of our parks, many of our jail facilities, our major administration facilities, and they have not been significantly reinvested. I'm primarily recognizing that there are many fiscal challenges in this county. Despite the wealth that we have here on the Monterey Peninsula, there's great areas of poverty. About 1 in 5 people use a food bank in this county. So it has been difficult for the boards of supervisors to invest in buildings and roads and bridges when there's so much demand on the social services side of the ledger. This board, recognizing the great needs and the impact on the delivery of services as well as social services, has made a commitment to invest in a variety of important capital projects. We've been very fortunate to receive major state grants for many of these, particularly our new $80 million jail addition, new juvenile hall facility, of our government center improvements. We have an enterprise system, which is a fancy name for a county-wide integrated computer system that lets us run all our business applications and our human resources applications on a coordinated and connected network. We also need to reinvest in our IT, our information technology infrastructure. The industry is brilliant. They make an upgrade every 3 years, which requires us not only to upgrade the software, but the hardware, and I'm sure many of you experience this at home with your personal computers. So it requires not only the county, but many government organizations to constantly invest and reinvest into IT infrastructure. Our Schilling Place project, as you remember, that was the old Capital One facility, and it was quite political, but the county was able to secure that at a very favorable price, and that is a tremendous resource for us to house our staff for the next 20 to 30 years and minimize the cost to our other county programs. And then finally, the East-West Wing Courthouse. This is our old historic courthouse, and the Board of Supervisors has authorized us to issue debt not only to upgrade Schilling Place, but to fully rehabilitate this building for use by our district attorney. So looking at those two projects, the historic courthouse is a Art Deco masterpiece built in the 30s, and it is really the jewel of downtown Salinas. And it has been very difficult for us because it's an older building and it is very expensive to rehabilitate that. It is a historic structure, but what we have been able to do by leveraging the Schilling Place, this building as well as other assets for security, we've been able to issue what's called the certificates of participation, which are lease revenue bonds. And with that, we've been able to issue COPs on the order of about $52 million. We recently issued those and are very excited about embarking on those projects. Beginning with the east-west wing renovation, we're just finishing the early plans. It'll be coming to our Board of Supervisors in the next few weeks. Basically, it provides long-term office space for our district attorney's office. We'll also be able to locate the law library, the grand jury facility, as well as one of our supervisor's office, and we still have what we call swing space or additional space for groups or services. As you can see on the first floor, if you're looking from Alisal Street, and if you look up to the right, you can see where the grand jury and the law library will be, as well as the food service. If you've ever been served on jury duty, Randy's Snack Bar will come into that building, and we'll be able to hopefully upgrade our coffee and treats for those of you serving on our grand jury. The next levels, again, will be primarily office space. One of the major improvements will be connecting the two buildings. If you visit the site, you'll see that the east and west wings are distinct structures. And for those of you that remember the old government center, there was a sky bridge between the north wing, which is now the Superior Court building, and the east-west wing. Well, they took that down. And so what we're doing is providing connectivity to those, and that will help us with our ADA compliance as well. And then finally, the upper level will be office spaces and record storage as well. If you do get a moment, if you haven't stopped by the carvings on the outside, Joe Mora truly made this a work of art. And if you've ever been to NPS, Joe Mora has done some work there as well. And it's truly a county treasure. And we're quite pleased that we can restore that to its original splendor. We're also very fortunate to be able to build a new juvenile hall. This is badly needed. Our juvenile hall off Natividad Road was built in the 50s. It's crowded, it's old, it's tired. This is no way to treat our young people as they go through the juvenile justice system. So we took a chance. We were leveraged under the support of the Board of Supervisors. We were able to obtain a $35 million grant to tremendously offset that cost. We'll be building the new facility in the field behind this structure. And once that facility is constructed, we'll move the kids over into that new facility, demolish the old one, and then finish the site with some administration building and food service areas. And here's just an overview of the site improvements to give you a sense of the magnitude. Here's a visual of what the new facility will look like off Natividad and Chaparral. It's a significant upgrade. And most importantly, the quality of the facility for young individuals. The cells are improved, the access to services, the joint space. This will be our standard security layout. And this is a 3D image of what that'll look like. A state-of-the-art facility will be an attribute to the neighborhood. As we move into the high security facilities here, again, this allows the kids, they're not released into other facilities, so they're kept in their units, and this will allow us to provide education, food services, health services right on those units. Equally as important as our new jail housing addition, this will allow us to upgrade our jail facilities while the existing structure remains in place. And again, we were able to obtain an $80 million grant from the state, and it required an $8 million match, which our Board of Supervisors approved. And I know there's a lot of debate about new jail facilities. It's a national debate. But what this does for us is it allows us to provide decent facilities and gives us flexibility to convert the older facilities over time. This facility will be constructed in the parking lot, and it's a fairly constrained space, but there is enough to put this new structure. And here's an overview of the county jail addition that will be directly behind Natividad Medical Center. Here's some typical floor plans. It'll be a mezzanine style design. Again, improved facilities for these inmates as they await trial or serve their local sentences. And here's a visual of what this addition will look like. And this is the entry area. Again, a graphic image of what that will look like to serve individuals visiting. And here is a visitation center that's a video-based visitation center. So with that, before we talk water, I think let's open it up for questions. And myself or the supervisor will be pleased to respond.
What percentage of the total budget you said went towards education? And then I want to know what percentage of that goes towards UC Davis and the reason for that?
It's roughly 1%. It's a very small percentage. And the term education is perhaps a misnomer. It's cooperative extension.
What's that mean?
So cooperative extension is an agreement between the University of California and the counties, and it provides educational and research activities in support of agriculture.
Okay.
So most counties have a cooperative extension.
So you'll put it under your ag budget as
No.
far as
No.
extension off of that?
No. So we have UC. So it's a unique arrangement where the director is really a state employee, but we provide the office space and the research and support facilities. And then they come down and they do a variety of agricultural research and publish that information in the back there.
First of all, I want to give my opinion on that. I was really disappointed that Monterey did not take the opportunity to purchase the commercial space for the library in Carmel Valley Village. It would have been a good deal, and I think it was a lost opportunity. My question is, what are your feelings about the proposed management change at Laguna Seca? Because in my opinion, a lot of my friends, if you go to not-for-profit, it's not-for-profit now, so a lot of the money goes back to charities and the volunteers do the work. If it switches to a for-profit, they're going to have to pay for those people, and the cost to get into the tract is going to be higher. So I think, that this needs a lot of introspection and looking at. The fact that there were 9 secret meetings held bothers me.
No transparency.
Okay.
Take it away.
Thank you. When the going gets tough, staff look to the Board of Supervisors. We understand the optics around the Laguna Seca issue. Let me just take a moment and give a little background. Scramp has been operating that facility in partnership with the county since 1957. And the county has been renewing those agreements without any public process since 1957. And we know that from the public perspective, this is a very awkward issue. Why would the county be, considering somebody else other than the home team, a nonprofit organization? So we have nothing bad to say about Scramp as an organization. They're hardworking people. They've been good members of the community, and they've worked with us happily over many years. The Board of Supervisors is looking at not only Laguna Seca, but its park assets from a strategic perspective. As I mentioned, many of these facilities were built in the 50s and 60s, and they're old, they're tired, and they're beginning to lose their attraction to our visitorship. So if you take that in context to how tight our budgets are and the decisions that the Board of Supervisors has to make between health and welfare, foster care, mental health and health services to our inmates, investment in critical supporting infrastructure, roads, or investing into parks or discretionary activities like automobile racing. So the Board of Supervisors has asked us to look at that as though it is an enterprise operation. We had the same challenge with Natividad Medical Center. It was losing $20 million a year. We went back, we started to look at that as a business. We re-engineered how we do that business, and we now have about $50 million in reserves dedicated in cash reserves dedicated to Natividad. So when we look at Laguna Seca, we look at a facility that is dusty, it's old, We have a water supply that needs to be rebuilt. We don't have an adequate sewage supply system. The water has arsenic in it. It doesn't have adequate restroom facilities. And we certainly can hold events there, but what happens is when you compete on a national scale with tracks operated by International Speedway Corporation and Speedway Motorsports, if you look on the internet, you'll see the quality of those facilities. And because racing is an entertainment business, what they're trying to do in that business is attract visitorship and attract viewership. And when you do that, you increase sponsorship. And what the challenge that we're having at Laguna Seca is we are beginning to lose that competitive edge. So what the Board of Supervisors has asked us to do is to canvass the industry to look at options. So what we're currently doing is looking at options. We're not pro International Speedway, we're not pro Scramp, we're simply looking at options. We're going to bring those options to the Board of Supervisors to consider. But that facility is very important to our local economy. It's been estimated that this last race brought in about $3.5 million. So ISC has indicated they are a premier track operator. We have checked with other facilities back in Florida. I've personally spoke with the former mayor of Kansas City. They're good community partners. They invest in nonprofits. They do use volunteer resources. And they have the depth and breadth to bring in potentially significant revenues. So we're looking at it. So I hope that clarifies.
I'd like to tack on to that question. I'm new to the community. I've been here for about 3 years, been involved in motor racing for a good number of years. And looking at the various tracks around the country, in spite of the fact that Laguna Seca, Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca, is in need of continued upgrading and work, it's still a very top-notch facility, not only in this community, not only in this country, but throughout the world. We get competitors that are coming from Europe to the Reunion. It brings in a tremendous amount of money. And I guess my general question is, as you supervisors look at this, I know you have a lot of difficult things to look at. One of those being the kind of monies that are brought in and where they will go. If you bring in a for-profit group like the one from Florida, the question would be, what will that do to expenditures that are necessary to pay them? What will happen with ticketing prices? All of these things, I think, are very, very important issues to look at. And just in final, I read an article about this on Off 68, and two of your supervisors have an opinion about the whole Laguna Seca issue. I went online to try to find out more about what was going on, and there appears to be a good deal of discrepancy in what these two supervisors have said about the situation and what's being said by other parties about what the big picture is. So I guess it's very difficult to figure out just exactly where things really ought to go, understanding that this has to be something that makes sense for both sides.
Right, and sir, you're absolutely right. Laguna Seca the way we talk about it is, and this is, again, has nothing to do with Scramp, it's the county's asset. It's a world-class racetrack in a third-class venue, and that's been a challenge for Scramp. It's a challenge for us.
That's not what the race aficionados say. They don't call it dirt raid at all. That's not the word on the street. That's
You can step in.
I am.
Okay. The supervisor is going to assist me with this.
I'm moving Dr. Baumann aside for two reasons. One is he hasn't given me a chance to speak yet, and the time might run out, and politicians talk and want to. So I will, I'll just start with just a snippet on Laguna Seca. It is a beloved facility, and one of the things I've been asking for is a public process so that the community can talk about your desires, your vision for Laguna Seca, and then that the county can put together an RFP to try to respond to that. It doesn't seem to be the way things are moving, but I do think that it is such an important facility for the community. We need to really figure out how we're going to approach it and honor its much beloved history with all of the changes in the racing world that are going on. I just want to say I really appreciate Dr. Bauman's presentation, and what I think it demonstrates is the high quality financial stewardship that we have in the county staff. Watching this budget process for the last 7 years or so, we've been through a very difficult economic time. The people watching out for the short-term and long-term trends at the county, in the budget office, in the CAO's office, and all of the department heads, we managed to go through this economic downturn with. We thought we might have some layoffs there in one of the years, but I think we managed to avoid all layoffs. And all of this work on the building renovation and building ownership is thinking generations out ahead. When the county owns buildings, we are saving on lease payments, which, as you can imagine, local landlords look at the county as a long-term operation that pretty much needs space, and we don't always get the most competitive rate. So the more the county can own facilities, the more that's freeing up money, not necessarily in the short term because we have the debt payments to make, but in the course of 15 to 20 years, we own those buildings, and the money that was otherwise going to leases or the debt payments are available for the services. They're really thinking about these kinds of issues. I want to speak just a moment about the Board of Supervisors' role and the approach I try to take to these budget issues, and then we can get back to questions. My commitment has been to transparency, accountability, and really trying to think in an upstream investment sort of way about about the way we function. And we now have performance evaluations. The top management of the county have a regular process now, and I will take credit for the fact that I helped design and implement and bring my colleagues along to engage in this process. It started out being a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. Each year now we have, I think, very constructive conversations with our top leadership. We give them the expectations and priorities that we want them to focus on in the coming year, and we expect them to report back to us. That is a way that they can know, and we as the policymakers can know whether or not they are carrying out our directives. Before, there was no way to know. So we also are working on a system of performance measures for departments, so departments can know how effectively are they achieving the priorities of the county government to serve, to provide high quality services and to protect the natural resources. That's still a work in progress. A priority definitely is preserving the natural beauty of our area. Dr. Bauman spoke about tourism. We have, in addition to the natural beauty and the natural resources, water is a huge issue, and our largest industry, agriculture, relies on that. Our parks department needs to have open spaces and natural beauty for our residents as well as the visitors. So there are a lot of priorities there, and that sort of gets into the area of where do we put our growth and development? Are we making the right kinds of decisions about where growth should happen so that we are balancing our needs and protecting the natural environment? The other thing that I've really tried to do is I've tried to listen to the public and hear what you all are concerned about so that I'm representing the interests of the community, not just the people who have often paid people to come talk to me about their perspectives. It's through hearing from the community that I'm focusing on things like alternatives to incarceration, early childhood development. I have a whole list, but they sometimes fly out of my head. But that's the point being that when we have budget constraints and we have increasing costs of health insurance, for instance, for our staff, and so much of what the county does relies on staff. We need to be able to take care of their needs in a consistent and fair way. We really need to be thinking about, can we address some community needs early when it's not so expensive, rather than getting stuck with having to expand a jail facility. You know, we've missed many opportunities by the time we get to jails. So really trying to focus on that. And then the other thing I just want to mention is there are processes like performance evaluations that I've been very interested in focusing on. For instance, the financial guidelines. This is a small thing, but it's interesting. We have financial guidelines. They that lay out, they spell out the opportunities for the board to weigh in on the budget and priorities. We used to contemplate those financial guidelines right along with the budget. So the board wasn't having any opportunity to speak first and to think about what some of the choices might be and to give input. And I've helped steer that so that now we look at the financial guidelines in advance of looking at the budget itself. We also had a budget workshop this year, which allowed the public and the board to really look at some of the challenges that we were going to have. So again, I think the job of the Board of Supervisors is to try to make those input possibilities available to the public, so that we can give general direction to our staff. We count on them to get into the nuts and bolts, and they are highly professional, very, very skilled. And so as you can tell from the presentation and from we don't notice how smoothly and thoughtfully and proactively the whole budget process and various internal workings have been taken care of, because we don't have any drama like massive layoffs or declaring bankruptcy, at the county level. It's been done so well that it just goes on looking like it's a pretty good operation. There are challenges. There are challenges in any organization, but we've got a very, very strong management, and so it's really a pleasure to work with such a strong team and to try to steer the ship a little bit more towards prevention and accountability and transparency. So thank you for letting me say my piece, and now we can get back to questions.
Thank you.
So I think, Janet, you had your hand up, and then over here, and then over there.
I have a double question. I understand that there is a projected deficit in the future years, and I would like to know how that will be dealt with, and also how the county plans to deal with the several $1 billion worth of road maintenance backlog.
I'll let you take the road
Oh,
maintenance.
goodness.
But Mr. Former Public Works Director, but the projected deficit, we go through a planning process that gives us a glimpse out at least 3 years, sometimes further. And what that shows us is if we don't make any changes, what is likely to happen, and it often goes in a deficit direction. So taking that longer view means that we can look at ways to shift our priorities, make some changes. For instance, one of the things that we were able to do over the last several years in terms of employee retirement was we were able to negotiate with the bargaining units, and all of county staff now are paying the staff portion of their retirement. For a while, one of the benefits the county gave to staff was the county paid the employees' portion as well as the county's portion. So we look at those ways to structurally have the budget be balanced over time. There's another issue coming, a fairly large liability on the books, the opportunity for staff to cash in unused vacation time. It looks to me as though there may be some ways to adjust that, really look at that benefit to see if there's a way to still give a benefit to the staff and not have it be an $83 million liability on the books. But that projected deficit is exactly the kind of thing we've been seeing for a while, and we put the best minds of the public, county supervisors, the CAO's budget office, and the department heads to work to try to figure out how to bring it in line. It speaks to the kind of the tight fiscal constraint environment that the county operates in. But thanks to, I think, some pretty good planning and willingness on the part of all of staff to adjust, we've been able to keep ourselves from getting into that deficit position. You know, we'll be looking for some help and advice, I'm sure, over the next few years. It'll be a continuing challenge. Roads.
Thank you, Roads. Thank you, Supervisor. And if I just may finish up on the Laguna Seca issue. Again, we understand this is a very emotionally charged issue. I just want to clarify, the county is exploring options. We anticipate receiving a proposal from International Speedway Corporation. We will further hold public hearings on that. What I would suggest is, and I would ask for those of you who are interested in this issue, get engaged, let your supervisor know your concerns on it. When the proposals come out, take a close look at those. We will analyze those very carefully. Our interest is in preserving the asset, making sure it's competitive for the long term and continues to be a national attraction as it is today. One of the things that ISC indicated that they would welcome a partnership with SCRAMP, as they've done back at a facility in New York. So we have yet to see all of that, so no decision has been made. And you know, again, if you have further questions, contact myself or communicate with the supervisor on that. Speaking of roads, as I mentioned, there's much deferred infrastructure in roads, bridges, airports. Much of our public facilities across the nations have been underinvested. And we are currently in discussions with the Transportation Agency. They're in the process of requesting special legislation to allow a dedicated term-limited 3/8 cent sales tax specifically designated for transportation improvements, similar to what Monterey did with Measure P. And so we're in those discussions. The Board of Supervisors has allocated, I believe it was transportation occupant, $2 million a year in TOT toward road construction. But we have hundreds of millions of dollars of maintenance backlog across our road infrastructure. This county is, you know, very vast, 3,000 square miles. We have 1,200 miles of road, 172 bridge structures. You got another 600 miles of city streets and another 300 miles of state transportation facilities. Tremendous needs.
And I will just say that the Public Works Department now has a management system, computerized management system that prioritizes the needs for preventive maintenance, fixing of the roads. So I think we've got a really strong plan in place, but I believe for a number of years there was $2 million allocated to road maintenance, and it's various, when I would ask, well, how much do you really need to do it right every year? It was at least $20 million. So there has been an underinvestment for a very long time. So now the board has allocated extra money to that, but it's going to take a while for us to be able to even start to catch up, I think. So let's see, there was a question over here.
Yeah, my concern is traffic, and I don't know how much of that is under your purview, but it was mentioned bringing more tourists to the area, and as we know, the more tourists are here, the harder it is for those of us who are local to get around. And it was also mentioned how important the military and hospitality are to being income generators. But I know, being a resident of Pacific Grove, I don't try to leave Pacific Grove in the afternoon anytime when DLI is letting out or Pebble Beach's, their employees are leaving the area, because it is impossible to get to Monterey in less than half an hour, sometimes 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is something that is under your auspices, I'd like you to add it to your list, please.
Why don't I take this one?
Okay.
Unless you have something you want to say.
Please.
Each county supervisor serves on the transportation agency for Monterey County Board, and one of the things that the TAMC board has been focusing on quite a bit, unfortunately these things often happen once we realize we have a very sticky problem, but we are really looking at solutions that have to do with transit, with bicycle and pedestrian kinds of things, rather than widening roads. There's a lot of pressure we need to put in more lanes. Well, if you look at LA, you look at San Jose, you know that doesn't do anything. So TAMC is really focused on a light rail or bus rapid transit between South Peninsula cities and North Peninsula cities, with a connector to Salinas, where some of all this traffic happens. And so it's going to be a while before it happens, but I think the thing that I'm grateful for is that there is an effort. The focus is on things that could actually help alleviate the issue, rather than just creating more of a problem. In addition, there are efforts to link by train this area with the Bay Area, so a lot of the day trippers could, who are blocking up Highway 1 south on the weekends from about 11 in the morning till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, if they could be coming in via train and transit, it could probably help. So it's not going to be an immediate solution, but I'm grateful that it seems that at least the solutions being contemplated might have a chance of working. Did you have a follow-up?
Well, I was also thinking along the lines of incentives for carpooling. I mean, you look at the cars and everyone just has one person in the car.
It's a good point, and in some other areas, there have been conversations with employers to stagger the times that they start and finish, and you can take care of a lot of congestion that way. That's a good point. There was some energy for starting to convene those sorts of conversations, probably by the transportation agency, but it's going to take leadership to do that, and so I appreciate you reminding me. We'll see what we can rustle up.
Okay, and Supervisor Parker, thank you for your comments. And let me just point out, the supervisor was very gracious about staff, but if there's a tough budget decision to be made, that's in the hands of the Board of Supervisors. And without their leadership over the past 10 years, we would not be in the fiscal condition that we're in today. And we're very pleased. We were just, as part of this debt issuance, we were rated by Standard & Poor and Fitch, and we were able to get a AA rating on a lease, which translates to a AA plus on a general obligation. So we compliment the board on their fiscal leadership. So let me just briefly talk about water and see if that causes more stir than Laguna Seca. We're unique amongst regions and counties because we have our own local water supply. Carmel Valley, of course, Nacimiento, San Antonio reservoirs. We don't rely on any federal or state projects or snow melt from the High Sierra. If you look over countywide, about 600,000 acre feet are used. And to put that in perspective, our problem with the Monterey Peninsula in 9510 on the river, the Carmel River's about 11,000 acre feet. So there's a lot of water used in this county. There's a lot of water generated in this county. About 510,000 acre feet go for agriculture and the associated wildlife releases, and about 90,000 overall county is for urban uses. So if you look at our key sources of supply, the two reservoirs recharge as well as natural recharge into the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. It's our largest and most important basin. And then you have several hundred miles of watershed that come into the Carmel River basin that supply those of you that live on the Monterey Peninsula. And then in North County, out of the Pajaro Valley groundwater basin. Now, there's a lot of water generated during normal years. Of course, we're in a historic drought, but these are average numbers. Every year in a normal year, 260,000 acre feet go out the Salinas River into the ocean. So just a small portion of that, if we have, just as a comparison, we need 11,000 acre feet in the Carmel River, if that could be diverted or stored, that could mitigate our water supply issues. Similarly, for the Carmel River, you have some 70, I believe it's 75,000 that flows out every year. So in normal years, we do get a water supply. We're just simply not capturing it at all. and hence what we do capture soaks in or infiltrates into the groundwater basin, and then we pump it out during the remainder years. You've all heard of our seawater intrusion problem. That continues. The county board, acting as the Board of Supervisors of the Water Resources Agency, has not only constructed the 2 reservoirs to help recharge the basin, but also what they call the Purple Pipe or Rubber Dam project, which captures river water, combines it with treated wastewater, and provides that to the Blanco area in terms of recycled water to impede or retard the seawater intrusion that is coming in as a result of pumping. And here's a graphic. As you can see, the colored area with the red tips is the front of the intruded seawater. It is almost to the city of Salinas, and we understand that California Water Service, which provides Salinas, has detected increased levels of salts. So this continues to be an important issue for us to mitigate in the decades ahead. That's our beautiful Lake San Antonio. It has been dry like that for several years now. We've been able to have a music festival down there for 2 years, but other than that, this year we just unfortunately had to close the facility, and we've got some 30% left in the other lake. So we are hoping that we're going to get some rain this year. We hope it doesn't flood like has been predicted in the papers, but nevertheless, we are desperately in need of rainfall. There's a number of projects underway related to water supply. One of the key is what is called the Interlake Tunnel Project. And this is a project that was actually conceived back in the 90s. The Water Resources Agency retained an engineering firm that looked at county-wide a whole variety of projects. And that was Boyle Engineering, and they produced 2 reports about this thick that had some 20 or 30 projects that were analyzed, cost, environmental impacts, and this was one of them. And the idea being that you have 2 reservoirs, and the watersheds that supply them have different levels of productivity. And so what happens in a winter period, we have Lake Nacimiento and Lake San Antonio. Lake Nacimiento fills 3 times as fast as Lake San Antonio, and it just overflows, and it flows out, like the graphic we saw earlier, out into the Pacific Ocean. So the idea was to provide an overflow, if you will, from one lake into the other. So when it fills up, rather than overflowing down into the river, it will overflow into an existing reservoir which has capacity, and it will provide 2 benefits: water storage, and it reduces flood potential because you're diverting water from the river. So that project is currently under design. This will get very complicated quickly, but I just wanted to show you the numbers, okay? One of the big issues for public sector agencies is pension costs. And this whole issue really blossomed back in early 2000s, 2003. And at that time, PERS was telling the public agencies that they had plenty of money in their assets and that they were fully funded. And that stirred up labor, and it stirred up particularly the deputy sheriffs and the Police Officers Association and the many unions to increase pension benefits because they were quote unquote funded at the time. Many jurisdictions increased benefits. Monterey County did. Were comparative to other jurisdictions. We didn't go overboard at the time, but my predecessors did make that choice. And then shortly thereafter, the state went into a recession, and it was clear that PERS didn't have adequate funds. So the pension cost liabilities are what they call actuarial liabilities, meaning they're not real cash liabilities, but they're projected based on an actuarial study of your employee population, their age of death, and their retirement income. So as Supervisor Parker indicated, one of the steps that we took was to negotiate with our employees to ask them to pay a larger portion of their share, and that reduces the public's cost, if you will, through our taxes. So we monitor this very closely, and we are very similar to other well-funded counties. Another benefit's called OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Many jurisdictions, the city of San Jose is one example, used to offer full health insurance paid for their retired employees. And a lot of that was common in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And then they realized with the extension of life and so forth, you have a police officer who starts at 20, He gets 30 years of service. He has 3% at 50, so he gets 90% of his salary. And then he or she lives for another 30 or 40 years. And guess who's paying for it? We are. Fortunately, our prior boards of supervisors was very conservative in this area. We do allow our retirees to participate in our pooled health plan, but they got to pay for it themselves. So we've also joined a trust, and we pre-finance those costs. So that's another liability. One more, workers' compensation costs and general liability. Workers' compensation, again, is one of these costs that's projected. It's not actual. So an individual gets injured, they have a liability, it becomes the liability of the employer, and then the employer has to pay their medical costs through the life. So again, we try to pre-fund those, and we put monies aside, and we try to stay at a high funded level. And then last but not least, it's similar for general liability. This is when the county gets sued. So what we try to do is develop reserves to bank against those costs should they occur. And then finally, vacation. These are our vacation accrual liabilities. In any large organization will have this. This is for vacation time or leave time that employees accrue, and they have that time on the books. And then when they retire, or if there's options to cash that out, the jurisdiction is responsible for paying those costs. So it's a big number. It's about 28 million. But remember, we're a $1 billion organization. Monterey County will be in business for centuries, God willing. Hence, this is a liability that we have to ensure is appropriately reserved for the anticipated demands on it in the near future. So I hope that answered some of your questions. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and you've just been a wonderful group. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Janet. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lou. I think that was a very informative presentation. And Jane, I didn't get a chance to introduce you, but we all know Jane, who is our supervisor for 7 years. And thank you very much for your presentation today. Meeting is adjourned.